Hi, Jen.
Hey Tia, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have my audience be inspired by you and learn from you. It's a great way to start the day.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation.
You are truly a pioneer
Thank
in
you.
the well-being at work, happiness at work movement. And you became the chief well-being officer at Deloitte in 2015, way before the world knew that the pandemic was coming and all of these seismic shifts were going to happen. So, my first question is, how did this happen in 2015?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I get often. What I can tell you is that I think it was, well, I know that it was kind of this merging of my own personal need and experiences at work and just the changing landscape of the workforce and the way that we were working way back in 2015. So much about it was changing in terms of technology, et cetera. But what was going on with me personally was that I was coming out of being in a pretty much a complete state of burnout, to the point where I had to take time off of work and take a leave of absence because I had let things get so bad that my body and brain said, okay, if you're not smart enough to do something about this, we're going to do it for you. And so, I could, get up out of bed, but I really couldn't engage in life or work in any meaningful way. And I fortunately had a very emotionally intelligent leader at the time that was like, yeah, you need to take some time off. Like, you need to take care of yourself. For me, it was really, really hard. And remember, back in 2015, we weren't talking about burnout and well-being and happiness at work, so in a lot of ways, I didn't know what I was going through. And so I knew that there was something wrong. I processed it as failure because I looked around and I was like, everybody else is showing up. Everyone else seems to be fine. So there must be something wrong with me. So let me just continue to push through, and eventually I'll figure it out, or things will get better. And I'm here to tell you, things don't get better unless you're intentional about it and you seek the help that you need, and ask for the help that you need. And so, in coming back to work after that leave of absence, I told that very same leader that I thought that I needed to resign from the organization because going through what I went through made me very passionate about wanting to help others not get to where I got once I had an understanding of what happened and what was going on with me. And there wasn't a role like that at Deloitte. It wasn't that we didn't care for our people or that we didn't have great rewards and benefits for them, but we didn't have a person that was focused on, how that all comes together. What does a language around well-being and happiness at work look like? How does that get activated in the workplace? And how do you actually build a culture around it, changing mindsets and changing behaviors and ultimately changing the way that we work so that it's better for people's well-being?
Mhm.
And so as I explained this to her, she was like, "You're not going anywhere." And so I credit her in many ways with the vision, because she was like, this is, if you need this, there's a lot of people in this organization that need it. And that was such a light bulb moment for me, having a compassionate and empathetic leader to say, you're not alone. You're not the only one. There's a lot of people that are needing this and aren't raising their hand. And so she really encouraged me to put together a business case, and that's what I did. I put together a business case of what I thought this would and could look like at Deloitte. And I met with a handful of different leaders in human resources and in our C suite, and basically said, give me a chance to do this. And if it doesn't work, I'll quit. Those were my exact words. And here I am. I'm still at the organization 8.5 years later. And it's probably more of a focus than ever before. And so I would say that it's working.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you gave me serious goosebumps twice in your story and in your answer. First question I have is, you said you were in a burnout state and your body and brain told you. I believe that there's many people that are in burnout states and they're just pushing through. So
Yeah.
how did your body and brain tell you? What were the specifics? So people listening might go, that sounds maybe like me in some cases.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I have this conversation a lot because I think there is a continuum to burnout, right?
Yeah,
It's not like, one day you're not burnt out and the next day you can't function, right? Like it
right,
doesn't happen like that. I talk to people that it's like the frog in the boiling pot of water, right?
right.
Like
It's a continuum.
yeah, exactly. So I do think that there's this continuum. And so like I said, for a long period of time, I knew that there was something wrong. Like I knew that I was experiencing unusual levels of exhaustion. I knew that my emotions were like really high and really low, just kind of like all over the place. I was unable to, not that I was like, like I was overly emotional, but it was also like just extremes. Like
Yeah,
I was either really, really, really positive or I was like completely depressed and down in the dumps. There was like no middle ground.
right.
My a lot of things changed with like my habits with like eating and what I would eat, and my relationship with food changed. My relationships with exercise and workout, my personal relationship suffered. And what I will say is that many times when you're experiencing a mental health issue, it's hard to recognize and identify these things within yourself. But what I will tell you is that people that care about and love you will say something. And that was true for me. Many people said something, not just my leader at the time, but my husband had been telling me for many months, like, hey, I think there's something wrong. Like, you can't continue at this pace. You can't, but do we ever really listen to our spouses? And so my view was like, he just doesn't understand, my family doesn't understand, the work is so important, how would they, like all the stories that we tell
They're
ourselves
not
about.
walking my walk.
Yeah, exactly. So if I mean, and so but when you're burning out or burnt out, I would say the level of exhaustion is not like, you can't just rest over the weekend and feel well. Like it is this constant, like that is just this constant state of kind of feeling buried, right? And so, but there are definitely telltale signs leading up to it. The number one thing I would say to people, because I do think it's sometimes hard to recognize and or accept in yourself, that was certainly the case with me, but other people who care about you will say something and you should listen to them. um
Listen
yeah.
to the people who love you.
Listen to the people who love you. Yeah, I mean, I
Yes.
think that's the and then I think the other kind of like, if I could do it again type of thing, I was afraid to ask for help, because I was afraid that somebody would or people would perceive me asking for help as a weakness, or that somehow I didn't belong here. And now I know that number one, you need to ask for help, and number two, asking for help is one of the like biggest signs of strength. It's not a weakness, even
Right.
though we tend to perceive it that way.
Right. Right. Okay. You also, this again hit me with goosebumps, and as this was happening, and when your loved ones and your boss and you were at this place where you were recognizing like, okay, I'm in burnout, I'm not okay. You processed it as failure. And I think that is would a completely common, normal in our society in this day and age, human feeling, reaction, thought to have,
Hmm.
right? Like, I can't handle it all, so something must be wrong with me.
Right.
And so, knowing what you know now, what would you say to yourself? Because there could be people who are definitely feeling that right now and going, okay. And I will say, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm not in corporate America anymore, but this hits home for me with juggling two little kids, work, husband, all of it, of
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, where it's like, whoa, this is way too much. Well, how come I can't handle this all? Like, there's tons of people that are doing this. We have kids, and so anyway, I think it's very human. I think it's very normal. Knowing what you know now, what advice, or what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different things. Number one, it's not failure. And it absolutely isn't. And I think with what we know now, and so much research that has been done on the topic of burnout. I think what is sometimes unfortunate about the topic of burnout is because there's not a concrete medical diagnosis, there's still a lot of people that actually question, like, is burnout actually real? I mean, even living in the world that we live in with I mean, 1 in 2 in the workforce per Gallup has experienced burnout, like 1 in 2 people. That means you or your spouse or your friend, or I mean, it's one of you, right?
Right.
I
Right.
also
Oh,
think
I
that,
have for sure in
yeah,
my past life. Yeah, I'm thinking of different jobs and positions. Absolutely.
yeah, and so it is so common, and I think it also, the World Health Organization talks about burnout, specifically in terms of the workplace, and I do think that that definition needs to change, because I think in the world that we now live in, it isn't always specifically related to work, but it is
No.
related to all of the things that are going on in our world, and all of the roles that we play, and all of the expectations that are put on us or that we put on ourselves. And in many cases in the workplace, what we now know is that many of the systems and the ways that we're working are the things that are actually increasing the levels of burnout. And
Yeah.
so
I can't
we
help but
have
think about the technology infiltration.
100%. But the interesting thing about that is, in large part, in most industries, we have been working the same exact way for 100 years or more, other than the introduction of technology, which happened faster than anything in human history. It has completely embedded itself into every aspect of our lives. People even have refrigerators that are now connected to the internet, which I still don't know why. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's another conversation.
Wait, is the
The thing
refrigerator like, pass me a juice? Like
I don't know. Maybe one of your listeners has a connected refrigerator. They can tell us, because
yeah,
I'm not
not
sure I even want to
surprised.
know. But here's the thing with technology. You can make as many arguments about technology and how it made us better as you can and how it made us worse. And so the answer is, it's not that the technology itself is bad. It's that we as humans haven't really harnessed the power of technology, or don't use it in a way that enhances our humanity, right? And so, to
Mhm.
get back to burnout, yes, I do think that technology and the way that we're using technology in our lives and in our work, and the fact that we're always on and constantly connected, but I also think the world we're living in is really, really hard right now. Harder, probably. I mean, we're not in a world war or anything like that, but there's just a lot of stuff going on. And I don't know, Tia, if you've read the research around like ambient stress, that because of the constant connection and the 24-hour news cycle and the access to information, even when we're not directly focused on something or paying attention to it, we're carrying that stress around with
Mm.
us.
No, I haven't
And
heard about
so
ambient stress. I'm going to, yeah, I'll go read that research.
yeah, it's fascinating. So what I would say is, it's not a weakness, and there's a reason why 1 in 2 people are
Yeah,
experiencing some level of burnout, right?
yeah,
Because there's things going on in our world, and in particular our workplace, and the way that work is designed,
yeah.
and that is causing this, and that we need to address, and we need to address in a very different way than we ever have before.
Yes, yes. This could be, gosh, we could probably talk for 4 hours, but I also can't help but think, in addition to work, like I believe government does play a part too, right? Of the
Mhm,
well-being of,
mhm.
like I said, we could probably talk for 4 hours.
Government,
Oh,
education, it needs to, I
yes.
mean, every aspect.
Childcare,
Absolutely. Yeah.
maternity
Yeah.
leave,
Hmm.
there's so much. So how come every organization needs to have a chief well-being officer, people focused on well-being? I mean, I see this as imperative. It is vital, based on you quoted the 1 out of 2 Gallup stat. There's so much other research, whether it's coming from Deloitte, coming from Oxford, Harvard, et cetera. But how come this is so important? It's gaining momentum, which is great, and you're a part of the reason that it is. But how come it's so important?
Well, I mean, look, as long as we employ human beings, and I don't, I mean, I know there's a lot of there's a lot of conversation in the world and in the ethos about AI. But I believe that most organizations will always employ humans, and there will be a role for humans. And probably even more importantly now, but as long as you employ humans, you need to care about their well-being. And I think that we have been experiencing many of the downstream impacts of not truly caring about workforce well-being, not because leaders are bad, but because we haven't had to tackle this issue in this way before. Historically, many of the programs and tools and resources and benefits were owned and executed by human resources. And that's not
Yes.
wrong and it's not bad. That still needs to continue. But I do think that every organization needs to have somebody that is specifically focused on the culture and the behaviors and the behavior change and the mindset change, right? Because we're living and working in a very different world. And I would
Mhm.
say leaders within the C-suite, if you're the CFO, it hasn't historically been your job to worry about these things. But
No.
now we know these things are truly bottom line issues. And so the
Yes.
CFO should be worried about them, right? And the CFO does have a role to play. And the C suite in general needs to own this issue. And so there does need to be, an owner of it, right? Specifically, what I would absolutely love it if every organization had a chief well-being officer. Do I think that, that would be kind of, the panacea,
Visionary.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But I get it, right? I understand that there are many organizations that maybe they can't afford to have this role, but that doesn't excuse you from the C-suite needing to own this, right? And needing to own pieces of it, or more importantly, reaching into HR and helping to empower HR to address the workforce well-being issues in different ways than we have before. And what I mean by that is, in large part, many well-intended organizations and leaders are investing a lot of money in workforce well-being. And
Mhm.
that is great. And it is the right thing to do, to have the right set of programs, tools, and resources for your people to access to take care of their health and well-being. The issue is that those things are table stakes. They aren't necessarily going to solve the problem of where we are now.
Right. Because it's like
Right?
back to the place of systemic and culture, which is a perfect segue into your role that you have been in for a month
A
now
month.
as human sustainability leader at Deloitte.
Yeah.
Tell us about this. Tell me about this role. And I want to hear your dreams. Like, um, what are you hoping to achieve and change? And, you know, you're going to inspire other companies and people to do the same.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for bringing that up. Some of it I might have to get back to you on. We might have to do a part two.
Sounds good. We
But
can
it
definitely do a
but
part two.
but essentially, human sustainability in many ways, the conversation has evolved from a workforce and workplace well-being perspective to the things that we're talking about, Tia, around what are the systemic issues related to work and how we're working,
Yeah.
that need to be dealt with so that the tools and programs and resources and benefits that organizations are already spending money on can truly be utilized and maximized. So, like I said, it's not that those things are bad or ill intended, or not that they're even the wrong ones, but we need to deal with the systemic issues of, quite frankly, the way that we're working and the way that we're living. And so, for me, in my new role as human sustainability leader at Deloitte, we have a purpose office, purpose and DEI office, and it's a pretty unique office. But what the office really stands for is, or what the office does and the strategy around it is defining what Deloitte cares about and stands for as an organization. And so the pillars of our purpose office are social impact, climate sustainability, equity, and trust. If you think about those four things, and how we set goals and aspirations as an organization and even as individual human beings. If the human beings that make those decisions around what those goals and aspirations are, the policies on how we are going to reach those, the way that we're going to work or not work. So looking at, if you think about climate, if you look at, travel and net zero and all of those types of things, the humans are the ones that are making the policies and decisions around these types of things at Deloitte and otherwise. And if the humans are unwell, then we're going to have a really hard time reaching our stated goals and aspirations.
Like
And
the
also
problems of the
yeah, and
future
also
of what,
because
right.
we've historically, we and others, again, not ill intended, have looked at these different areas like social impact and climate and equity and trust and well being, quite frankly, as separate areas, but they're not separate.
All holistic. It's all
Yeah,
interconnected.
it's all interconnected. And so my role is to kind of look across our purpose and say, where do we embed well-being so that we make our goals and aspirations achievable and sustainable, but then also really jumping into this area of human sustainability and kind of furthering Deloitte's commitment to not only the well-being of our workforce, but the long-term collective well-being of our own workforce, our organization, our clients, the climate, and society, and how those are all interconnected. And so I think in many ways we live in this world and in this society where we're always looking for instant gratification. And so
Yeah.
we roll out one program or do one learning thing, or and we expect everybody to be completely changed because of it. And wouldn't that be great if that was true? The problem is the issues are systemic, and so we need to go that step further to start to solve those problems about work and the way that work is designed and relationships and human connection, and what does that look like in a hybrid world in a real meaningful way, because we're seeing these crazy shifts, right? Everybody's in, everybody's out, everybody's somewhere in between. I know you work a lot in the hospitality industry, which is very different because many people have to come into work to do their job, right? And so what does that look like, and how do we maintain and sustain sustainable work and sustainable, how do we support sustainable work and sustainable living for people so that there is a long term? And that
Right.
might sound, like a dreamer. It might even sound esoteric, like that's very nuanced. Do you really expect people to do it? But I mean, I think it's the answer, right? I mean, we have to be thinking about our climate. We have to be thinking
We have
about
to.
broader
There's not, yeah,
societal
there won't be
issues
a
and
planet for the
yeah,
companies.
and the mental health crisis and health equity and the healthcare system and all of those things, where they're kind of coming to a head right now. And we
Yeah.
really need to take
The
a step.
loneliness epidemic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
all
we're not going to solve it overnight, right? And so we need to take a step back and have this long-term view of like, okay, what can we impact in the short term? What can we impact in the medium term? And then what are the long-term goals and aspirations that we can meet as long as we're doing the right things along the way?
right. Um, so let me ask you this, because I think for someone listening, they might be thinking, okay, what can I do? There is a good feeling of checking the boxes and having things done. You get that dopamine, you feel like you're making an impact. And I know everybody listening truly cares about people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening to the Arrive at Happy show. So when you think about systemic issues of work and how we're working, can you share a couple things to either think about or a couple things to do if you're a leader right now? One that comes to mind is right off the bat, and I know good old Adam Grant talks a lot about this and many others, but one, that comes to my mind is looking at who is overworking and how much, right? That would be one in terms of human sustainability, systemic issues, right? You said work and how we work. So that's one that just jumps to the top of, overworking, because then you're not sleeping, you're not exercising, you're not friends and family. Like there's this massive ripple effect. What are some other areas that you think leaders can look at right now, or maybe start making some changes right now, really, to do things this summer, this fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most powerful thing that leaders can do right now is ask their workforce.
Is what?
Ask their workforce,
Ask their workforce.
ask the people doing the job. Ask them, how's it going? What ideas do you have for change? What isn't working? What is working? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of, right? This exercise in human sustainability in many ways is to look at, what's working and what's not working, and help organizations to direct their investments to the things that the workforce actually wants, that's actually going to help the workforce. We can't
What's
do
going to
that.
help them?
We can't do that without asking the workforce. And I also think the way forward is this regular open dialogue between leaders and the rest of the workforce. Because I think what we're seeing now is that leaders we're separately kind of making decisions. The workforce is saying, this came out in our recent advancing workplace well-being study, is that there's this huge disconnect between
Yes.
what leaders think about the well-being of their workforce and how the workforce is actually doing. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the number one reason is that many leaders themselves are struggling, right? And so it's
Yes.
hard to know if people are doing well yourself if you're struggling. But I also think there's a lack of real communication, and leaders asking these real questions and co-creating the way forward. This isn't a problem that just leadership can solve by themselves. They need to involve the workforce and include the workforce so that the workforce feels a sense of ownership and responsibility in the way that work is designed. And by the way, leaders many times are removed from the way that work gets done on a day-to-day basis. That's in some ways what it means to be a leader. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader. It just means you're doing leader things while the workforce is doing workforce things, right? And
Right.
so if you're not having these conversations about, like, hey, what are the barriers in the way of you getting work done? And how would you do it differently? And what would you do? And what do you need more of? And by the way, what are we doing that you could care less about and you want less of, that isn't
What do you
having an
want us to
impact?
stop? Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, having conversations doesn't cost any money. I mean, it costs time. It doesn't cost any money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the most powerful thing that I would do. That's the place that I would start, because it creates a conversation and it creates collective responsibility. And I think that that's the only way forward. And it's the only way to get people to kind of stop pointing fingers at either leaders or the workforce.
Or the workforce.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. Um, a lot of large organizations do, as you know, an annual engagement survey, and that's sort of their like listening strategy. And then there's some team meetings and one-on-one, but it's not enough. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the Oxford study of
Yeah.
work well-being and firm performance, and asking people about their happiness, their job satisfaction, their, stress level, as well as, feeling that they have purpose. And, I think it needs to be monthly, right? I think
Yeah. Yeah.
and
It
then
needs
of
to, it
course you
has
have
to.
those,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just say, throw out the annual, like, I don't know.
Well,
It's,
because so much changes, right? The annual is a point in time, and
yeah,
so much changes. And so regular workforce sentiment, but we're also living in a time where, data is everywhere, right? And so it
yes,
doesn't always have to be a surveying of your workforce. You can use latent data that exists within the organization. I mean, you have to do it in a way that, of course, is ethical and respects privacy. But now with AI and predictive models and things like that, it is very possible to, do work where you understand what are the drivers within your workforce of well-being, and kind of have an always on listening strategy that includes both employee sentiment and employee surveying with the use of latent data and so you asked me, like, what's my dream, right? I'm very passionate because I do think that that is a really powerful way to understand real time what's going on
right.
with your
Real time.
workforce,
That's the key.
real time, and then you can apply those tools and resources and benefits that you're spending money on to the problem in the moment, right?
Right.
And say, hey,
Not
we
waiting.
know that this is going on, right? Maybe it's a socioeconomic event, maybe it is a climate event, right? I mean, we're living right now through a time of extreme heats and floods and all kinds of weirdness going on across the globe, right?
Yeah.
And that's affecting people in very different ways. And if you knew that or had some ideas, you could apply strategies in that moment. And that's really powerful.
Yes. Yes. Okay, no, we're over time, but I want to ask one more question. For people that are really passionate about their work and their careers and they're busy in their personal lives too, what advice do you have, or how are you currently taking care of yourself? Because I know, based on your health history plus your passions and just who you are, that you really care about your well-being, especially as chief well-being officer for 8 years. You care about your well-being. And so advice, thoughts, tips, so that people can have sustainable personal well-being so that they can be the best of their work in their personal life.
Yeah,
Give a little individual to close.
it's such an important question. The first thing I would say is, we've been misled to believe that self-care is selfish, and it's not. It is the most important thing that you can do for yourself, so that you can show up for the other things in your life and the other people in your life that are important to you. And so, getting rid of that, self-limiting belief in our heads that if we take time to focus on ourselves and do the things that matter to us, regardless of what they are, but do the things that enhance our well-being, that it is somehow selfish. It's absolutely not. It's the most important thing that you can do for yourself, whether those things are big things or small things. For me, what does that look like? I am adamant about my sleep. Anybody who knows me well will tell you that I will just get up and leave, and I don't even say goodbye. When it's time for me to go to sleep, I have that reputation. And even so much so that, like, those that work with me that know me well, if we are out to dinner or something from a work perspective, they'll be like, Jen, it's like almost your bedtime. Don't you
Jen.
need, don't you need to leave? So I don't compromise. I do not compromise my sleep. I don't. I also am really pretty diligent about movement and in particular exercise. And so I schedule that in my calendar. Reason being is, yes, I love the physical health benefits of exercise, but I struggle with anxiety. And so it is one of, if not the best thing that I can do for myself, and one of the best strategies to help manage and live with my anxiety that I have on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah, for me, it's stress management also.
Yeah.
Yes.
So also for many people, it's social connection, depending on how you like to exercise. If you go to classes, things like that, or getting out in nature, that's very important for your health and well-being. But my strategy is, it's on my calendar. It is on my calendar. I make it available to my whole team to see so that they know.
Ooh, I like that. Your team is seeing your exercise,
they're seeing, I mean, if you look at my calendar, it has breakfast, lunch, dinner, 2 snacks, workout, and bedtime.
I love it. Oh
And
my
my
God,
team
the 2 snacks. I love it.
Yeah, my team can see that, right? And the point being is, because as a leader, when you do that and when you are open and authentic about those things, it also empowers and permissions everybody else to do the same. And so, yes, it's important to me as a person, but it's also important to me as a leader to make sure that, yeah. So.
Love it. Love it. The snacks I haven't heard before. That's new. That's a first in the calendar.
Gotta have the snacks. Oh, I'm a hangry person, so I gotta have the snacks.
So is my 7-year-old.
Yeah.
She's yes. No, I think we all are in some way. Oh my gosh, Jen, thank you so much. This was incredible. I definitely want to do a part 2.
Love it.
Maybe when you've been in your role a little bit longer, and we'll talk more about it. For people who want to learn more about you, get your book, your TED is coming out, want to connect with you, tell us about that before we wrap up.
Absolutely. So yes, I do have a book that I co-authored with a colleague of mine called Work Better Together, which you can get, at your favorite book reseller. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also connect with me or follow me on Instagram at jenfish23. I also have a newsletter called Thoughts on Being Well that's on Substack, which you can find out more about also through my LinkedIn. And then, Tia, as you know, I also have a podcast called Work Well, which you were
Yes.
just recently a guest on, and your episode will be coming out soon as well. So, on any podcatcher, you can type in Work Well, all one word, and find me there also.
And the name of your soon to be released TEDx, the
The
title.
name, the title of it. That's a really good question. I'm not sure that I know what the title of
Oh,
it
okay.
is.
Well, Jen, you could just Google Jen Fisher TEDx, and it's coming out very soon. It
I
might not
think
actually be
it
out
might
by
be
the time
around the
this is
future. It
released.
might be the future of work,
Yes,
might be what it is. So,
that
but
sounds
I don't
about
know if
right.
but that's a good question. I should probably ask what the title is.
But I'm going to be sharing it with my whole community when it comes out.
Thank you.
So for
Thank
everyone
you.
listening, you're going to
And
make sure.
congratulations on your amazing viral TED Talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it's probably almost, let's see, lunchtime for you, or maybe another
Yeah.
snack. Thank you for coming on. This was fantastic. I want to personally just thank you for the inspiration that you've given me and many, many others. And I'm excited to see you at the next World Happiness Summit, or maybe sooner.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tia. It was great being on.